dead me. You was a dead me. I want you to the fucking room, nigga. You was a dead me, nigga. You was a motherfucking dead me. You was a dead me. The moment you took my daughter in that room and you couldn't tell me, you couldn't show me a fucking video or no motherfucking, nigga. This for any motherfucking worker that think that they finna motherfucking put my daughter in a motherfucking room and think they ain't gotta talk to me. You was a damn man.
Release right now. You want to go to jail?
You better back the fuck up. I'm already ready to go to jail. Go ahead, call the cops. I'll be waiting. Anybody else think it's okay to take little girls in the room? Anybody else think it's okay? Huh? Is it okay to take little girls in the room? The fuck is not. I don't give a fuck what position y'all hold. You take my fucking daughter in the room, this is what the fuck's gonna happen to you. You still breathing? Back up. Fuck that. Fuck that. No. I called the cops already. And they didn't want to do nothing. I couldn't. Nobody take my daughter into a motherfucking room. No, I didn't. He's still breathing. I ain't make my fucking point.
Anti-Afro Spingallis, what you just heard at the beginning of this video were the comments that a father/rapper from Arizona was making to a CPS worker as he was choking the CPS worker, angry over a meeting the CPS worker had with his daughter at school. What I did, I put the news report at the back end of the video. The timestamp is below the title because I want to get right into this commentary. I want to say this up front, regardless of what went down, of anybody's opinion, I have a feeling that the dad, the father of this daughter, was set up. That's just my feeling. He was set up and he fell for it. It's altogether possible that he did what they accused him of, but I just get the feeling that somebody knows he's a hothead and contacted CPS knowing he would go off. I don't think they realized how he would go off, but I think that somebody yanked his chain. But nonetheless, I'm going to go through all the different elements at play here. And I have some criticisms to level towards the father, the CPS worker, and the school. I am going to address these issues. First, I want to start out by acknowledging agreement. The CPS worker and the father agreed that this father, single father, raising the kids on his own, I believe they said he has 2 kids. One's a 9-year-old girl, and I believe the other's male. I don't know how old the male is. They agreed he takes good care of his kids. That was a consensus. Now, I have on the community post, it was 9 years. I have to amend that because I learned that the father was arrested in 2017 and did 1 year in jail for apparently attacking someone he didn't know violently. The person suffered serious injuries. So it couldn't be 9 years, but he had been taking care of his children by himself for some period of time. Just wasn't 9 years. So, what I would like to say, first and foremost, the attack was not justified. CPS does not drive around town looking for people to, trump up on CPS issues. They don't go peering into windows. They don't go sitting in classrooms. They don't go up to random children on the street and ask them about their parents. CPS gets involved because somebody calls them. That's how they get involved. That's the only method by which CPS is going to get involved. So simply, somebody reported that there was something going on with this family, and it had to do with physical abuse, suspected physical abuse. The call went in and said the father was mistreating his children. Now, I actually went and listened to the entire Facebook conversation leading up to this attack. I also listened to one of the episodes of when the father went to the school complaining to the school that they allowed the daughter to go into a closed door session with the CPS worker. And apparently there was another episode where the father had gone to the school. So he had gone to the school 2 days in a row. And then apparently there was another contact with the father and CPS. Or actually there were 2 other contacts. So I looked at all of those instances, not just the abbreviated news reports. So my critique, obviously, for the father is what he did was not justified. Doesn't matter how he felt about what happened. His main complaint out of everything was, this man took my daughter into a room and closed the door. That's what he kept saying over and over and over again. That was his main reason that he verbalized, was driving him just into places where he just felt it was intolerable, and he demanded explanations as to why the school allowed the CPS worker to do that. He kept calling him a man. Didn't even want to acknowledge the fact that this is a CPS worker conducting official business. None of that mattered. Okay. So my concern, like I just said, of course, it was not justified because he's been charged with actual attempted first-degree murder. It's not equivalent that you end up with this charge and other charges. So my concern with the CPS worker, several concerns. I believe that the father was trying to see just how far he would be able to go with the CPS worker, and was basically sizing him up. Before I get into sizing up, I wasn't necessarily referring to his height, but I do think it's a factor. Do you notice on this picture, he's barely 5 feet tall? So I think he made a very specific point to evaluate the ability of anybody to really take him on. In addition to the mind games he was playing. He's into mind games and really ready to take anybody on physically as well, but I think he's more so into mind games. Now, he doesn't have an extensive history of physical attacks. There's only, I think, 1 incident. But he is very heavy duty into mind games. He reminds me of like the cult, the Nuwabians, was basically sizing him up to determine whether or not he could do what he ultimately did to him. He was that angry. And I think the CPS worker made a near fatal mistake by not setting a hard line with the father. Let me explain. Yes, he spoke to him. Yes, he got information that he needed to get, but he continued to have contact with the father after the father told him, listen very carefully. And I'm saying this for a reason. I'm saying this because I feel this could have assisted with potentially avoiding what happened. It's not about blaming the victim. We're talking about prevention and safety. Safety and prevention starts with you personally. You can do a lot to reduce the risk of harm and death. And now, if somebody's hell bent, dead set, we know the situation with that, but there is something you can do. And you are taught when you're working in high risk professions how to take precautions, how to protect yourself. And the CPS worker didn't do that. So let me explain. During the encounter before the attempted murder, this is what they're saying it is, attempted murder, the CPS worker met with the father, and the father said to the CPS worker, "I come here to kill you, but my daughter vouched for you." This is what he told the CPS worker. The CPS worker said this, and the father said this. So I believe this is what was stated. You had the person who said it, and you have the person who heard it. It was directed to. When that statement was made, what the CPS worker should have done, not necessarily acknowledge the statement, he should have cut off the meeting. And this already should have been something you have in your repertoire. He should have said, "I recognize," because it was already established that this father was in no way resolved. Calm down. And when I said calm down, he had not been screaming and hollering at this point. He still was not resolved internally as far as his issue about, "You took my daughter in a room." He was still very much internally agitated. And it was very clear because he was talking about it and going to all these different people. Very easily, a very quick exit. I understand you are still concerned. You have issues with this. And my supervisor is willing to address this with you further. And here's my supervisor's name and number. And I'm going to have to leave because I'm headed to a meeting. This is what you already said. You already know to say stuff like this. When somebody does stuff and threatens your life, this is a threat to kill you. And you're going to stand there and talk? See, I feel the father was planning and plotting all along. He's just trying to see how he could potentially reel this person in. But he wanted to see if he could get more information. And I think this built the father's confidence. It made the father feel good that he could potentially turn the tables because he felt, and he eventually admitted it, you've got the power. He felt the CPS worker had the power. So he wanted to disarm this CPS worker to make him feel comfortable. And requesting yet another meeting with the CPS worker. And the CPS worker agreed. Big mistake. Now, let me say this. There are times when you encounter a dangerous situation, like you're working high risk position, and you tell superiors and they blow you off. Now, the CPS worker very well could have told the superior, and the superior blew him off. My feeling is that didn't happen. We read and heard, because I've been following this case, that they removed security from the building. This is what's been reported. But that does not remove your responsibility to take, first and foremost, the lead with your personal safety. That's a personal responsibility. My sinking feeling is that he did not inform his superiors that this happened. Let's say he informed his superiors that this happened. I'm going to go on the other end and say, had he done so, and they are responsible people, because I just acknowledge there are times when there are irresponsible superiors. Had he told them, and they are even halfway decent superiors, they would have removed him from the case. But if you were taking the lead with your personal safety and responsibility, they would not have needed to remove you from the case. You would have told your superiors, I'm no longer comfortable working on this case. You would have stated that. But the CPS worker tried to appease the father and reassure him and try to make him feel better because he was so upset. You took my daughter into a room. He wanted to placate the father and make the father feel that he was a safe person and he can cause his daughter any harm. You can't do anything about that. You did your job. You cannot change the fact that this father was never going to agree with you. You have to be okay with that. You can't convince somebody that they have to agree with the law that they're never going to agree with. The policies are in place. With respect to CPS, every state has their own laws, but they're pretty much the same. With respect to this issue, child welfare, CPS, this is the law in all 50 states. They come to the school. They ask to speak to a child. There is no employee at any school, not the principal, not the superintendent, that can deny you access to the child. If you're a CPS worker, they are required to call this child or go get the child from the classroom and produce this child for an interview. If the school employee says no, they can be fired or they can be arrested. That's obstruction. This father will never agree with that law that's written, passed, legislators passed this law. Is this father ever going to agree with this? Is this going to make this father feel better? No. So the CPS worker took the wrong path. The CPS worker spent his time trying to convince the father that it was okay. And that is a very serious mistake. He went and met with this father after the father threatened his life. There are times you cannot handle things. It doesn't matter how nice and calm and engaging, because the father didn't raise his voice. Did you hear the man raising his voice? I don't even think he was yelling when he grabbed the man and choked him. Did you hear him raise his voice? That's possibly his demeanor. That's possibly how he is. And this, again, disarmed the CPS worker who didn't get the cues. You don't necessarily have to look for traditional signs of anger, screaming and hollering. Listen to what people are telling you. They could whisper in your ear they're going to kill you. Listen to the words. Your life was threatened and you didn't take appropriate action. Now, people can get all mad at me all day, every day. He didn't take care of himself. I'm so thankful he survived, but you have to make the moves based on what's in front of you, based on what people have told you. Now, very clearly, after the threat was made, the police should have been notified. Now, the other part that I think potentially hamstrung the CPS worker, because there was an interview, he was asking about the mother. I'm going to get another video that was showing you another interview. I can't remember the name of the channel. Had a couple other interviews. He did not want to give the name of the mother. So if you don't have the name of the mother, it's difficult to really do a complete investigation into the family background, because records with CPS even cross agencies, across states, because CPS records, if there is a history, are most easily accessible by the mother, because obviously it's confirmed, undeniable, mother gave birth to this child. It's not so easy to confirm paternity, but maternity is much easier to confirm. He didn't want to give the name of the mother. So the investigation, quote unquote, it wasn't actually an investigation, it's an inquiry, because the CPS worker determined pretty early on that there was no basis to continue with the case. He was ready to close the case. Wasn't going to go anywhere. But the father was the one who continued. And he actually put his family's business out here in the street. Another thing the CPS worker did, he failed to assert the right not to be recorded. Yes, he's a public official, but the laws, I am certain, are different with CPS because you have the confidentiality issue. He doesn't even know who the mother is. So now you're putting the agency in a position of liability. You need to sign a release in order to have information discussed about the family. Who's the mother? Did she sign authorization? The father is supposed to be signing authorization. He should have been signing a waiver to have this information publicly disclosed. He didn't sign a waiver, but the CPS worker is up here speaking on camera. Now, he didn't show his face, but he knew the father was streaming on Facebook. The CPS worker should never have held the convo. He never should have held the convo from the outset because of the death threat. And number two, never should have agreed to have sat down to be on live stream, period. Now, I believe the other interview, I don't know if the CPS worker was aware if he was live streaming. Because I don't think the father was really looking at the camera. He was just talking. So you have to check that out. With the one that happened when he was attacked, very clearly he was messing with the camera, and the CPS worker knew he was messing with the camera. It was a bad scene. And again, people will probably look at this as blaming the victim. No, it's not blaming the victim. You have to debrief. Even in the future, if he doesn't go back to this job in life, these are precautions you need to take for yourself in your personal life. If someone is threatening you with violence, believe them. It doesn't matter if they're screaming at you. It doesn't matter if they're quiet. It doesn't matter their demeanor, because this father, as you saw, did not raise his voice a single time. Here's my critique for the school. Father was there 2 days in a row. The Facebook post that I saw was the second day. They were exasperated. My question is, how was he there for a second day? Okay, the first day, okay, it's fresh and new. But even so, he came back the second day for a reason that I just described with the CPS worker. He sized them up. And they pretty much let him know he could do what he did. They're sitting there in their office where they have a job to do. I mean, taking attendance is a legal responsibility, by the way. Attendance, school attendance is a legal responsibility. Working in the front office of a school is not an easy job. You get audited by the state and your records need to be in order. So there's a lot that goes on. But they're up here spending an hour dealing with this father over an issue they have absolutely no control over. And I just explained that a second ago. They, for some reason, didn't have the skill. They were unwilling to put a limit on what he was doing. Sir, we've explained this to you. This is not something within our control. If CPS comes to speak to your daughter, anybody's daughter, Sally, Joe, Bob, Sue's daughter, by law, we are required to summons the child and present the child. Now, we have work we need to get done. And can you please excuse us? Have a nice day. Sitting up there for an hour, he's just sizing up everybody and deciding, I'm taking control of the situation. Now, I have to hand it to the police officer, and there was also another man. I don't know if I think it was a school employee. You can call it sexist if you want. It took men to come in there to get the situation under control. The women, he just took over and just bulldozed them. They didn't even know how to handle him. The police officer was very clear. There's nothing they can do. Your work here is done. He wasn't being rude to him. The school board would be the place to go to complain about the school. The principal can't even help you. If you have an issue with the policy that the school is implementing, the school board is where you need to go. There is nothing else that can be done here. And then there's another man there. You would trust these people? He said, yes, I trust them with my life. There's nothing. They were able to cut him off. The women couldn't even do anything. They're up there just, he's recording us. What's wrong with people? You can't assert a line to say, I'm busy. We have work to do. We don't get our work done. It's trouble for us. So can you please excuse us? We need to get back to work. Have a nice day. We hope your daughter does return to school. Now, here's what I want to say. The father kept blaming the school, that the daughter didn't want to come to school. I happen to believe that it may have something to do with the father's reaction. He was blowing everything out of proportion. A mountain out of a molehill. Yes, you're upset. We understand. But you got to think about it. I believe he was blowing things out of proportion and involving his kids. His kids were actually in the office, although he wasn't hollering and screaming. The fact that they knew he was so distressed, I think that had everything to do with the daughter not wanting to come to school. There could be other reasons. We don't know, but I don't tend to believe she didn't want to come to school because the CPS worker took her in the room and asked her questions. Because he said the daughter vouched for him, the CPS worker. How can the daughter be, quote, vouching for the CPS worker, then turns around and doesn't want to come to school because the CPS worker took her in a room? That, to me, doesn't sound consistent. But in the end, what he claims to have been so upset about, more of the same is going to be done. There are going to be more, quote, men taking his daughter into rooms and interviewing her, because I think there is a possibility that the police, the child abuse investigation arm of the police department, is going to reinvestigate the child abuse accusations out of concern that the CPS worker potentially didn't investigate well enough because of what I stated. He did not report the death threat because he was possibly too intimidated and closed the case too quickly. That's what I think. I think they're going to go deep into this. I think they're going to find the mother. I don't know what they're going to uncover. I don't want to say because someone is violent, this is going to be like an explosion, because think of all the people in prison right now. Most people in prison have children. Like they say, like 96%. Those who are paroled from prison, part of their parole is reunifying with their family and becoming a responsible parent involving their children and raising their children. And there are parents who regain custody. So just because you have a violent background, that does not remove you from having access or even custody of your children. Now, if it involves a crime that was grievous and horrendous involving your children, that's another story. That's a totally different situation. Now, let's say he goes to prison and gets out and his kids are still minors. I don't think this is going to disqualify him from being a parent. But most unfortunately, I think his time is going to be quite substantial, because I looked at the statute for Arizona, and it's, I think it's a 7, 10, and 20-year sentence for attempted first-degree murder. So if this charge sticks with the trial, he's at the 20-year mark because this is a CPS worker. Then there's other charges added on. I think he's looking at the minimum 20 years. So of course his children are not going to be minors anymore. I want to reemphasize that I think somebody set him up. I'm not sure I believe he beat up his kids. My feeling is I don't believe it happened. We're going to find out. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm going to stick with what both of them agreed with at the beginning, that he was taking care of his kids. I don't think just because you fight with adults, that means you're beating up your kids. That doesn't always correlate. Sometimes it does, not always. I think somebody had it in for this father and they got what they wanted. So this is what happens when you let people yank your chain. You let people get your goose. You let people realize and recognize your weak spots. Losing it, losing your temper, having the propensity to just haul off and attack others. And I think they got exactly what they were looking for. They wanted him locked up, and they accomplished the task. Now, I got a lot more I want to say about this, folks, but in the meantime, you know the drill. Buyer beware.